Hey, I'm Mike Gilliam in the CUNY TV studios in the shadow of the Empire State Building in New York City. Welcome to Let It Rip. In what could be a clear indication of what the 2020 presidential race might look like, President Donald Trump has brought race to the forefront with racist tweets and comments aimed at 4 congresswomen of color. Representatives Ilhan Omar of Minnesota, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of the Bronx, Rashida Tlaib of Michigan, and Ayanna Pressley of Massachusetts. The behavior is unprecedented in modern times. Sure, some of you may remember the racist and segregationist words of Alabama's George Wallace.
And I say segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever.
But he was a presidential candidate. Never have we heard things like this from the President of the United States of America, telling duly elected officials maybe they should go back to where they came from, a statement that harkens on a day gone by. And his immigration policies, when it comes to black and brown people, go hand in hand with his statements. It's behavior that cannot be dismissed as just Trump being Trump because it sends a dangerous message from the top. Here to look at the president's conduct and his immigration policies, we have the co-chair of the 2019 Women's March and former director of the Arab American Association of New York, Linda Sarsour, and Bronx Borough President, Rubén Díaz Jr. Welcome to Let It Rip.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Good to have you both here. I want to start by playing a clip of the president on the White House lawn.
These are people that, in my opinion, hate our country. Now, you can say what you want, but get a list of all of the statements they've made. And all I'm saying that if they're not happy here, they can leave. They can leave, and you know what? I'm sure that there'll be many people that won't miss them.
It seems to me that he's really equating not supporting his policies with being un-American, kind of wrapping himself in the flag. If you don't like what I'm doing, then you can just get out of here. You can go back to your country. It's like things they used to say years ago.
To me, is reminiscent of what we hear from in the past and even currently from dictators, right? They equate themselves to the state. So if you are critical of Mr. Trump, then he tries to equate that like you are critical of the United States. And for me, when you look at these 4 congresswomen, known as the Squad, which I like that name, and by the way, let me just be clear, I'm with them, right? They exemplify everything, Mike, that's good about and great about this country. And they exemplify, in my opinion, what it means to love your country. First of all, he's disgusting for these remarks, and we know that about him. It's nothing new. His racism goes back to his editorial or his ads on the Central Park 5. It goes back to him being birther-in-chief. Remember when he made his announcement to run for president of the United States, how what he said about the immigrant, especially from Mexico, the Muslim ban. It goes on and on and on. So we know that about him. In terms of the 4 congresswomen, first of all, 3 of them are Americans, and what better way to exhibit your love for country the way Omar did, and to come here with your family and be part of the political process. I think that it epitomizes love for country, and what's even sadder or disheartening is not necessarily that this clown attacks him in such a way, is the lack of courage by the leadership of his party.
That's right.
And even some Democrats, and I'm a Democrat, and the fact that they haven't really chimed in.
Linda, jump in here.
I mean, I share identities with 3 of these women. Rashida's Palestinian. I'm also Palestinian. Ilhan Omar is Muslim, and so is Rashida, so I'm also Muslim. And I'm also born and raised in New York City like Alex. So for me, just listening to this president tell 4 women to go back to where they came from, he has no analysis. He has absolutely no idea what he's talking about. I mean, are you telling Ayanna Pressley, who is a descendant of enslaved Africans, to go back to where she came from? Are you telling Rashida Tlaib, who's Palestinian, whose country of origin of her parents is under an occupation. We actually can't go back to live in Palestine, even if we actually wanted to go there. It's just really deplorable to see this coming from the president, because what it does is it reinforces the racism that we already know exists. And it emboldens. If you have watched the type of threats that they have received, if you watch the type of trolling they receive online, and one of the things about the situation that triggers me most is I've been attacked by the son of the president a few times on social media. And when people, ordinary people who are Trump supporters, see the son of the president or the president himself, it makes them bold. They feel like, oh, okay, so if the son of the president and the president are going after this lady or these women, that means we can too, and there will be no consequences. I mean, we have a president who said he can shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue right here, and he wouldn't be held accountable. So we have to understand that this is, whether you're Republican or independent or a Democrat, this is not about whether you agree with these 4 women or you don't agree with them. This is about safety and security of people. This is about living in a country where they are allowed to say whatever they want. And on the issue of being anti-American, I always say to people all the time, they are for me, the epitome of a patriot. For me, a patriot is someone who wakes up every morning and fights to make their country truly the greatest nation on earth. Anyone who sits around and says this is just how it is and this is the status quo that we're going to maintain, you are not a patriot. And
yeah, it appears to me they're only working to make America better.
Absolutely. I mean, their positions, they're consistent, they're bold. And to be clear, and the borough president said something very important, our own party got to get it together, because we have to stand by the squad, because they are just an example. They're just using them as martyrs of our movement for change in America. So Nancy Pelosi needs to stand by her sisters in this moment and be bold and courageous in the face of this opposition, because if something happens to these 4, then it becomes free range on everybody else and every other politician in this country who's trying to do something right.
Let me just chime in here, because Linda said that she also identifies with 3. Well, I identify with Alexandria, right? I'm Puerto Rican. Mm-hmm. My parents are Puerto Rican. By the way, Puerto Rico is part of the United States. Mm-hmm. So this just shows the ignorance of not only this president, but a lot of the members in Congress, that when we go to Congress and we advocate for Puerto Rico, many of them don't even know where Puerto Rico is located. Mm-hmm. And so this plays into that xenophobia, and it needs to stop. And this is no time for anyone to remain quiet.
Okay. I want to go over some of the tweets that he issued over the course of this controversy here. We'll talk about that. And we're going to get to Nancy Pelosi a little bit later on as well. The Squad is a very racist group of troublemakers who are young, inexperienced, and not very smart. They're pulling the once great Democrat Party far left, and were against humanitarian aid at the border, and now against ICE and Homeland Security. So bad for our country. And how about this one? I don't believe the 4 congresswomen are capable of loving our country. They should apologize to America and Israel for the horrible, hateful things they have said. They're destroying the Democrat Party, but are weak and insecure people who can never destroy our great nation.
Well, look, when you have the Squad or any member of the House or any one of us who are questioning the treatment of people who have a lot of reason to leave their country south of the border in Latin America for a myriad of different reasons, and they're coming here and they're seeking asylum, they're seeking safety, and they're being welcomed not by folks that understand, but by people who have armed weapons, who are separating children from their parents, when they're not being fed, when they're being held in deplorable conditions. What can be more American? What could be more humane? It's not just about being American. It's about loving, your fellow man and womankind, your fellow human beings, than to question the conditions of these children, babies who are being held in cages. And I would expect that from my representative, and I would expect that from every other American. For anyone to say that that's un-American is just speaking to a small segment of this country who unfortunately has not accepted that diversity is our strength.
Now, a lot of this stuff, though, is resonating with his base, with his people.
That's what I mean.
And it comes from the top, it comes straight down. I want to play a clip right now of a rally that was recently held in which his people shouted, "Send her back."
And obviously and importantly, Omar has a history of launching vicious anti-Semitic screeds.
Now, he later said that he tried to stop that down,
Never
and he
did.
talked very quickly. That went on for 13 seconds.
Sure did. I mean, one of the things that I think we're watching play out, and I hope that our Jewish sisters and brothers are really listening to this president very carefully. He's a dictator, and he's trying to divide us and trying to pin us up against each other. And what he's doing, he's speaking particularly to a very right-wing Christian evangelical Zionist base. And so what he's doing is he's using Israel and the weaponization of anti-Semitism to send a message to Jewish people in America that the Democratic Party is not your home, that the far left is not your home, that the progressives are not your allies, when in fact that's exactly the opposite. This administration is one of the most anti-Semitic administrations we have ever seen, anywhere from Steve Bannon being in the inside, Gorkas. I mean, we're talking about people who are like little Nazis. Like, I'm not even exaggerating that they're Nazis. And so he keeps using dog whistles, and he's using
Because he says that almost every day.
Every day. I mean, he has this obsession with talking about Israel, not because he cares about Israel or probably even knows where Israel is. It's because he's using he's finding something that's a very, kind of politically charged situation where he's trying to divide us from one another. I mean, there's a lot of people who have different positions on this issue, but we have to understand that this administration is not an ally to Jewish people, and the Christian evangelical right that he's speaking to directly are not our allies, and they are the ones that are fueling this administration. This is a very serious situation, and he keeps saying these four, the squad, are anti-Semitic. These are people who are literally on the front lines against ICE. These are the people who are talking about $15 minimum wage, talking about comprehensive immigration reform, getting free school lunches for kids around the country. And ICE is a very important thing that you keep bringing up, immigration customs enforcement. And I hope that people who are listening understand this. ICE was created in 2003. It hasn't been around for a long time, and it was created immediately after the aftermath of the horrific attacks of 9/11 to catch Muslim terrorists. When they couldn't find terrorists, this entire apparatus became a deportation machine and really became American-based Gestapo going after immigrants. And as you saw here in New York City, raids are happening on homes. They came to a neighborhood where I was born in Sunset Park. We're watching ICE at the border right now, separating children. So people have to understand we were without ICE before 2003, and we can live without ICE now. We do not need ICE in our administration or in our country right now.
And let me just say this, because I think it's important. Linda's talked about us having different positions on the issue of Israel. I'm a supporter of the state of Israel. I've always been. And this is the time now for us to show that diversity, show that unity. And at least I'm a Democrat as well. In our party, we cannot allow for us to be divided. We cannot allow for this guy who's occupying 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue you say dog whistles. I say he's more than that now. It's like a bullhorn. It's so blatant, and that's exactly what he's trying to use, these division tactics, and this is the time now that we step up and we say what you are allowing as the president of the United States to happen is putting not only these four congresswomen, duly elected officials' lives in jeopardy, but you are putting so many others. Mm-hmm. You are it's no wonder that since he's been the president, the anti-Semitism has been up. The attacks have been up, right? Okay. So you have to ask yourself, you have to do the math there, Mike.
Okay, we're going to take a short break here. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about Nancy Pelosi, the wedge he's trying to drive into the Democratic Party, and we're going to touch on immigration too. Mm-hmm. Okay, you're listening to Let It Rip.
You're watching CUNY TV, the City University of New York.
Welcome back to Let It Rip. I'm Mike Gilliam, along with Bronx Borough President Rubén Díaz Jr. and co-founder of the Women's March, Linda Sarsour, who is also the former executive director of the Arab American Association of New York. A lot of the racist stuff that we're seeing and hearing about is rooted in the immigration crisis and Trump policies. A rift developed between Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez over the border funding bill passed by Mitch McConnell in the Senate and then passed by the House without negotiating protections for children or stopping the separation of families at the border. What do you make of that rift that developed between Pelosi and the squad?
For me, it's a microcosm of what's been happening to the Democratic Party for a long time. I consider myself to be a small d, not a capital letter D, because I have never really felt like the Democratic Party has represented my views. I have been a progressive leftist for a really long time. I believe in universal health care. I believe that we should have comprehensive immigration reform. I have a lot of views around, unions and labor and things that some Democrats in the Democratic Party don't share, particularly generationally. There's a lot of moderate Democrats. I come from a district in New York City, out in the southwest area of Brooklyn and Staten Island. Those people say they're Democrats, but me and them don't align on a lot of issues. So for me, what we're watching is not just Nancy versus these 4 women. We're watching Nancy and Nancy's generation, like Chuck Schumer, against a young people who are going more to the left and in fact building power. We've seen that power here in New York City. We took out the entire independent council, the IDC members here in the state legislature. So I just want to say about Nancy Pelosi that I
got to stop you for 1 second. But there are some who say that progressive view and some of those things that you're talking about there, he will be able to frame that and beat the Democrats and win a second term. What do you say to that?
I say absolutely not. We've seen that here in New York City. I mean, we've ran against all kinds of people, Republicans. We've ran against very moderate conservative Democrats. I mean, just watch the recent Tiffany Caban debate. You had a 31-year-old queer Latina who came out of a public defender's office, almost win, and maybe still will be able to win a district attorney race. We beat 6, all the independent IDC members all over the state of New York. And we've seen this in cities across America where people have come up and rose up and have been able to win on this progressive kind of Bernie Sanders type platform, Elizabeth Warren type platform. So I'm telling you right now that if we in 2020 don't give people something to be excited about, if we don't give them those issues, we're going to end up, like you said, where we were in 2016. People weren't excited about Hillary Clinton. They weren't excited about a neoliberal, moderate platform. And we got to just be bold in this time.
What do you think about that?
I remember that I was in the New York State Assembly for 12 and a half years. Mm-hmm. So what I say is that the squad is doing their job. This is what they got elected to do, whether you agree with them or not, right? I remember when...
Can you win the White House, though, with that agenda?
But it doesn't matter. You cannot, you have to do it in a way, they call it a riff. Inside the conference, you're supposed to add to the debate. You're supposed to give your perspective. And the conference in the Democratic side in the House is very diverse. The same way that it was in the New York State Assembly. When I first got there, 2 years afterwards, there was the killing of Amadou Diallo. And I remember we had a legislative package. It was called a Diallo package. It had north of a dozen bills. And fast forward, a lot of the things that were in those bills, because it started with that advocacy, even though initially, the leadership of the assembly was saying, no, you're going to wind up dividing the conference. You got to start somewhere. And then hopefully you'll get, again, I remember when we had Governor Eliot Spitzer, and we wanted to do driver's license for those who were undocumented, right? Mm-hmm. And at the time, it was like, oh, no, that's not going to do Hillary well. Hillary was running for the U.S. Senate at the time. And but we needed that at least to start the conversation. Where are we today? We have the DREAM Act that's been passed in the Assembly. We've had the Green Light Bill, which is driver's license for undocumented. We've been able to redefine what a misdemeanor is, because a misdemeanor, if you get charged, you can serve up to 365 days. So now a misdemeanor in the state of New York is 364 days. The reason being is because if you're undocumented and you were arrested and convicted of a misdemeanor, even jaywalking, Mike, or petty larceny, or any low-level crime, if you serve the 365 days, that's a year now. That would automatically trigger the federal government to come in and start deportation proceedings. So we were able to get all of that, and it had to start out somewhere. If we had not been challenging the leadership many, many years ago, we would have never got to the point where we are now. So I think that it's okay, and it's democratic, and it's the way that any house should serve, where you have differences of opinion and you start a debate. To call it a rift, I think they don't do that when there was a time when men were the speaker, or men were the ones disagreeing with the speaker. Male Congress members. They didn't call it a rift. That was called like negotiations.
Exactly.
That's true. Okay, let's switch to immigration right now. Where are we with these immigration policies? He seems to be very rough on people who come from black and brown countries, and not so rough on other immigrants. I would love people to come in from Norway.
This is part of his white nationalist agenda. I'm not surprised by any of his policies, from the Muslim ban, and specifically focusing on particular countries in the, quote, Muslim world, from watching how he's addressing the current border crisis that we have, and also not even understanding the analysis around foreign policy, like what is our relationship to countries like Honduras and Guatemala and Mexico that causes these people to want to come to America in the first place. This is just part of his plan. This is the let's make America white again. And specifically, when he talked about the Muslim ban, he was specifically on the record himself said, maybe we'll take the Christian ones, and when he specifically picked Muslim countries, many of the Muslim countries he chose were countries on the continent of Africa. They're African countries like Somalia, for example.
Let's listen to him talk about the Muslim ban for 1 second. We'll get right back to that, okay?
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going on.
Now, that's before he was even president. He was campaigning at that point.
And he made a promise and he kept it. And people will say, but Linda, you're exaggerating. That was only 6 Muslim majority countries. There's plenty more Muslim majority countries. And you know this.
And he threw in a couple of other countries as window dressing as well.
Well, he dropped in like Venezuela, but it was only for diplomats. But anyway, we went all the way to the Supreme Court. I sued him in a lawsuit, Sarsour versus Donald Trump. We took him all the way to the Supreme Court. And we lost in the Supreme Court. And now it is the law of the land that the President of the United States of America can make a decision on which countries and citizens of nations can immigrate here or not. And I just want to say this about his immigration policies, every policy, how we're going to beat him in 2020. You can't beat him from the center. You have to create 2 choices. You're either with Donald Trump or you're over here. You can't beat him from the center. And that's why we couldn't beat him in 2016. And for me, I do this is what I do. I do electoral organizing all over the country. I'm actually assigned to 6 states in 2020. You got to excite the people. You got to expand the electorate. You got to give something for people to believe in. This anti-Trump stuff works on Twitter. It works maybe amongst the kind of elites and the bourgeoisies of the Democratic Party and the progressive left. But if you want to go knock on an ordinary Muslim woman or another new immigrant in Ohio and knock on their door and tell them Trump is bad, vote against Trump, it's not going to work.
People won't get people to the polls.
No, it's not going to get people to the polls. You got to give passion. You got to give a platform that people can believe in.
You also, part of that platform, and I agree with Linda there, part of that platform is you have to expose him for being the liar that he is. So he has not, lived up to many of the pledges that he's given those folks who voted for him the last time out. But I hope that part of that is also showing a face to the reality. What do I mean by that, Mike? What do I mean by that, Linda? I represent the Bronx. The Bronx is 1.4 million people. We're not perfect, but no one can doubt the fact that we're doing so much better today over the last 50 years.
Absolutely.
And why? When you look at the Bronx, about 40% of the people who live there now are folks who come from another country and were born in another country. And we have Bangladeshi Muslims, and we have West African Muslims, and we have so many people coming from the south of the border, and they made the Bronx their home. And if we see more economic development now, more job creation now, again, we're not perfect, but we're the safest Bronx that the world has seen in the last 50 years. And now we're the most diverse that we've ever been.
And it works.
So think about that. If we're sitting in the last 50 years, that means that we're safer than the late 50s. We're safer in the Bronx now than we were in the 60s. And by the way, in the 50s and 60s and 70s, the majority of the people there were not Muslim. They were not people from Latin America. So we're doing so much better today, and I hope that as we start to make the case as to why he's wrong, that we put a face to it, and everybody in the whole country knows the bad reputation that the Bronx has had for decades. If they see us for who and what we are today, and they see that it's been immigrants, it's been Muslims, there's been Latin America, people from Latin America coming here and making this part of the world a whole lot better, then they would see that the president is a liar.
It's also about which electorates we're going to focus on. The Democratic Party calls particular communities low propensity voters, like young people, some black communities, immigrant communities. We have to see these communities as high potential voters. And what's going to win us back the White House in 2020 is going to be women. It's going to be young people of color. It's going to be what we call new Americans and newly registered voters. And it's going to be young people. Like literally, we've been registering 17 and 18-year-olds all over the country. Those are the people that are going to win back the White House. And I'm excited about a platform where it's not not anti-Trump. I don't even want to talk about Trump in 2020. It's about what do you want? What do you want? What are the things you're looking for to make our country great? What are the policies that excite you? And, free college, freeing young people from college debt. Young people are excited about that. Universal health care. Like, I was on the phone yesterday for 2 hours trying to figure out how to navigate an insurance company for my father who was diagnosed with cancer last year. No one should have to go through that. And I'm very privileged to be able to navigate the system. So there's a lot of issues that Elizabeth Warren is putting forward, Kamala Harris, Bernie, and others that are really exciting the base. And that's the kind of excitement we have to maintain as we go into 2020.
Some have said that what he is really trying to do is really just distract you from all of these things, from all the various issues that you have, also the Mueller situation, and all of that. And Representative Presley spoke on this recently. Let's listen in.
It is impossible not to think of the trauma that is being inflicted upon children every day at our border. At the end of the day, if we improve the conditions of children in a cage, they are still in a cage. And we are viscerally, vigorously, and fundamentally opposed to the criminalizing, the vilifying, the mass detention and deportation of migrant families who are simply doing what is their legal human right, and that is to seek asylum. In the tradition of who we say we are as a country, a beacon of light and hope and of refuge. This is simply a disruption and a distraction from the callous, chaotic, and corrupt culture of this administration all the way down.
She summed it up pretty well.
She sure did.
And let me tell you, since he started attacking the squad, when you listen to Omar, when you listen to Tlaib, when you listen to Presley and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, I think they've done a phenomenal job at staying focused, staying composed, staying on message, bringing it back to the real issues, and having people look at this for what it is, which is this guy, I don't even want to call him president anymore, Mr. Trump, setting a smokescreen for whether it's the fact that one of his buddies is a pedophile and it was involved in human trafficking and Epstein, whether it's the issues that he has been doing or the things that he's been doing at the border. So he's creating a smokescreen trying to attack articulate, brilliant, compassionate, and very vocal members of Congress who have not fed into that, right? There's zero level of hatred in their voice. They've been articulating the issues and staying focused, and for that, I think we should commend them and continue to back them up.
And we should be supporting calls of Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, when she called for an impeachment inquiry. And the reason why is not because he is going to get impeached or because people will say, Linda, we only have a year and a half left and we can live with it and just win this election. It's about not setting a precedent. I mean, from presidents coming down the line, if they're going to look back and see the amounts of things that this president got away with, and there was no impeachment inquiry, I mean, he's gotten away with way, way worse than people in the past that we've impeached as president. So the fact that Nancy Pelosi has been an obstacle in the impeachment inquiry process, is something she should be ashamed of. And honestly, history is not going to treat her well on that decision.
Okay,
let me just say, I have to say this very quickly because we're talking about immigration. I'm sorry, but for those that are listening and viewing this, remember that if ICE comes knocking on your door, you have rights.
Yes.
People have to understand they have rights. If an agent comes and they asking you to show the ID, you should show the ID if you have it. But you have rights to an attorney. You have the rights to remain silent. I answer those questions. And if anyone is not sure what those rights are, you can call my office. You can go on our social media, and I'm sure that there are a lot of elected officials and organizations. Call 311. You have rights.
Okay, we want to thank our guest, Bronx Borough President Rubén Díaz Jr. and the co-founder of the Women's March, Linda Sarsour. I want to thank you both. A very spirited conversation here.
Thank you.
Okay, in just a second, we'll be back with more Let It Rip, and I'll have some final thoughts. Welcome back to Let It Rip. I'm Mike Gilliam. Now for some final thoughts. It's turned ugly. Both sides are now lobbing charges of racism. Democrats calling the president's statements and tweets telling 4 congresswomen of color to go back to the countries they came from straight up racist. And now President Trump calling the elected officials racist and anti-Semitic. And with all of this going on, some in the administration are saying that Democrats and people of color are too quick to use the term racist, like it's some sort of race card. So, I guess they're saying when you see racism, you should think twice about calling it what it is, and maybe call it, questionable language? Racist is racist, and just because you call it like you see it does not make you un-American. Just because you disagree with one administration's policies does not make you a person that hates America. You could be a person that is working for a better America, where all men are created and live equally. I think we have come to a time now where people who oppose racism are going to have to step up and stand shoulder to shoulder to right the ship. What do you think? Maybe stand strong and stand together to, dare I say, make America great again. Catchy slogan that cuts both ways. I'm Mike Gilliam. See you next time on Let It Rip.